An Orioles win should mean finally a full day of positivity in Baltimore. But unfortunately, the O's also saw another important player hit the injured list. I'll break it all down coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Friday, July 25th, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles' 4-3 win over the Cleveland Guardians on Thursday as they avoided a mopping at the hands of the Gardos. We'll get to the 5 things you need to know from that one, including a Charlie Morton good start. That was maybe his last one in an Orioles uniform. And the O's bullpen kind of figuring things out without their weapon, their mountain, at the back end. And then we will discuss that. Félix Bautista placed on the injured list with a shoulder issue on Thursday. Discuss what that means for the Orioles. We'll talk about some Charlie Morton trade rumors, the fallout of Josh Naylor being traded to the Mariners and what that means for the Orioles and Ryan O'Hearn, and then some big draft pick signing news as Slater de Brun got that contract with the Orioles signed. But all that and more is coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So let's start with this one with an Orioles win. Final score from Cleveland on Thursday afternoon. The Orioles 4 and the Guardians 3. Cleveland had won the first 3 games of this series, but the Orioles were not going to fall victim to a mop. What is a mop? That's a sweep, but in a 4-game series. Got to be a word more than sweep. It would be a mop. But the O's weren't going to have it, winning 4-3 to salvage 1 game of this 4-game set and get to 45-57 overall on the season. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from this Orioles victory in Cleveland. And the first thing you need to know is Charlie Morton was really good in maybe his final Orioles start. Morton came out there and had a 3-0 lead when he stepped on the mound at the bottom of the first and got into a little bit of trouble, second and third, 1 out, but got out of the jam with a 0. His command was mostly good. His curveball was good. Again, his number 1 pitch, getting the swing and miss. And really the big things that hurt him was Steven Kwan got to him. 2 solo home runs in this game from Kwan, who doesn't hit a ton of homers, but he'll pop one every once in a while and is a pretty elite hitter, and he tends to get you. He got the Orioles on Wednesday night as well. But other than that, it was like one kind of tough third inning where he loaded the bases, gave up a run on a sac fly, but got out of it with the Orioles still in the lead. His velocity was up across the board, fastball up to 96.5 miles an hour a couple of times, which was nice to see. And Morton pitched deep into this game. Final line for Charlie on Thursday, 6 2/3 innings, 3 runs on 5 hits, 7 strikeouts. He did walk 4, which you don't love, and give up the 2 home runs, but he also threw a season-high 107 pitches and tied his season high for 6 2/3 innings in 1 start. And actually, the 107 pitches, most he has thrown in a big league game since August 23rd of 2023. Been almost 2 years since Morton threw that many pitches. And he was through 6 innings, 90 or so pitches, 3-3 game. I thought for sure he was done. Manzolino sends him back out there in the 7th. He retires the first 2 batters before a 2-out walk, and Tony goes to the bullpen. But just what a job for Morton. And again, what could be his final start with the O's. He wasn't perfect, but he looks like a starter that another team is going to want with the stretch he's been on in essentially his last 13 outings over the past 2 months or so. Since mid-May, he's just been a different pitcher than he was early in the year. And I'm not saying he's going to be in someone's playoff rotation, but he's good enough to be in someone's 5-man rotation down the stretch, maybe move into somebody's bullpen in the postseason, got a lot of playoff experience. Now, he would be scheduled to start one of the Orioles games in their doubleheader on Tuesday against the Blue Jays. Of course, the deadline is on Thursday. So if they wait a little bit, he still could make one more start in an Oriole uniform, but it's pretty apparent he's going to get traded. We'll talk about that a little bit more lately, but I wouldn't be surprised if they deal him before Tuesday. If they do, it was rough early. It got much better lately, and it's very surprising that we're here, but we are, that Charlie Morton is actually worth something to someone else, and the Orioles as sellers are actually going to be able to deal him away. Second thing you need to know from Thursday's win is that the Orioles bullpen did its job behind Charlie Morton. And that was without Félix Bautista, placed on the injured list Thursday. We'll get to that a little bit later. So Mancelino goes to Corbin Martin in the 7th. He comes in, throws one pitch, gets a pop out, and keeps the Orioles up 4-3. Then Seranthony Dominguez came in the 8th, struggled a little bit with the heart of the order, 2 runners on, but put up a 0 and preserved the lead. And then Gregory Soto was the one who got the save chance in a 1-run game in the 9th inning. Now, I think at least for the week here that they don't have Bautista, but maybe do have Dominguez and Soto. I think Dominguez is more of the closer, but it's going to be mostly by committee. And you'd rather Dominguez face 3, 4, 5 in the Guardians order like he did in the 8th inning and then have Soto face the bottom half. That is why Mancelino, I think, structured it like he did. But Soto was great. I mean, he goes 1, 2, 3, 2 nasty strikeouts, and Ramon Arias makes a great play on a dribbler from Stephen Kwan to end the game and get the O's the 4-3 win. And for Soto, first save as an Oriole, his first save overall since May 1st of 2024 with the Phillies, and the 56th save of his career. Most of them came when he was the Tigers' all-star closer in 2021 and 2022, but he's had a few sprinkled in here and there. I can't remember if he had a chance last year. He was maybe the Orioles' best reliever by the end of last year, and they didn't have Bautista, but I'm not sure. I think Dominguez was still kind of taking over the 9th inning at that point, but nice to see him in that spot. Nice to see him go 1, 2, 3. That's certainly going to help the trade value for Soto for next week. Third thing you need to know from this victory is that the Orioles jumped all over Guardian starter Logan Allen in the 1st inning. And even though the Orioles were much better at this in June, the O's are still entering play on Thursday, 27th in Major League Baseball in team WRC plus against left-handed pitching. That is a 76 WRC plus they have against lefties. And through May, they were the worst offense ever against lefties. June was much better. July's been a bit of a struggle. It still has not been good. But they come out there in that 1st inning, and Logan Allen gets Jackson Holliday out, but then it goes Jordan Westburg single, Ramon Laureano 2-run homer to put the O's up 2-0. Laureano, who homered in 3 of the 4 games in this series against his old team, he is red hot heading towards the deadline. Then they got a Tyler O'Neill single, and then a Ramon Arias RBI double on a ball that Angel Martinez just completely misplayed in center field. And the 3 runs the Orioles got in the 1st inning was the 2nd most runs they've scored in the 1st inning against any left-handed starter this season. They got 4 runs all the way back on March 31st against Sean Newcomb, no relation, of the Red Sox. They haven't scored more than 2 runs in a 1st inning against a lefty since then. So really that all is to say, the Orioles haven't been able to jump all over left-handed pitchers this year, but they did it on Thursday and basically led to the win. Now, unfortunately, they did not score again against Allen, and that's been one of the Orioles' many issues in 2025, is that even when they have these big innings, these outbursts early, they can't sustain it. I mean, they eventually got an earned run against Allen in the 7th, but he was out of the game, and he was able to pitch 6 1/3 innings in this one and keep the Guardians in it even after giving up 3 in the 1st. That's another issue with this Orioles team, but at the very least, good to see them jump out there early in this one. 4th thing you need to know from the win is that, speaking of Tyler O'Neill, he had 2 hits in this game, had the single against Allen in the 1st, and again off the left-handed pitcher in the 3rd inning in his 2-for-4 day with a run scored. And on top of all the struggles for O'Neill this year, all of the multiple injuries and the time he's missed, he also hasn't, when he's been on the field, hasn't done the one thing you pay him to do, and that is mash lefties. Remember last year, the only hitter in baseball who was statistically better against left-handed pitchers than Tyler O'Neill was Aaron Judge. That's how good O'Neill was last year. Coming in to Thursday, O'Neill, on top of everything, was 3 for 29 against left-handed pitching this season. That is not what he is here to do. Now, the 2 hits were only singles, but it was the first time this year he's gotten multiple hits in a game against a lefty. It's a good step forward. His 4th multi-hit game of the year, but his first since April 5th. And, he's got 4 hits in his last 4 games. And even after missing the last 2 with what the Orioles called general soreness, he was back in there. He was playing the outfield. He got 2 hits. That is at least progress for what's been a disaster of a first season in Baltimore so far for Tyler O'Neill. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 4-3 win over the Guardians on Thursday afternoon is that Gunnar Henderson was the one who came up with the game-winning swing. Had an RBI single in the 7th inning off of Guardians left-handed reliever Eric Sabrowski after Alex Jackson had doubled earlier in the inning. Gunnar scores him to put the O's up 4-3 in the 7th. And it still has not been a good season for Gunnar against lefties. What put him at an MVP level in 2024 was how great he was against left-handed pitching. He's got a 61 WRC plus entering Thursday against lefties this year. That is not good. That's why his season has been a level down from what it was last year. But he's been so much better lately. Since June 1st, Gunnar has a 135 WRC plus against lefties. And especially with runners in scoring position against left-handers, he is now 8 for 13 in those spots since that June 1st date as well. The last basically 2 months have looked much more like peak Gunnar Henderson. Hasn't been getting a lot of help in July. He did in June, which is why the Orioles played better. But another big swing from him. He's been swinging the bat really well in the month of July too. And the Orioles were able to scrape their way to this win to avoid that mop and get a W as they come home to face Colorado. But a lot of news swirling as the Orioles come home, right? There's trade rumors out there. There's more injuries that they're dealing with. Other players around the league are getting dealt. Let's get to Charlie Morton, Félix Bautista, Josh Naylor in kind of a trade sense coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize that you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. And Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming game, maybe like Orioles Rockies with the floppy hat game coming up this weekend. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB. That is LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So for the Orioles, the good news on Thursday was a win. They haven't done that much since the All-Star break. They've done it just twice since they got back from the All-Star break. The bad news was they lost another player to injury, someone who surprisingly hadn't been on the IL this year so far, but had an injury narrative surrounding him. And that is Félix Bautista, who had missed all of last season after getting Tommy John surgery. He was on the Orioles opening day roster after being kind of slow played a little bit in spring training, but the O's slow played him through April and really most of May. It was until late May that the O's kind of let him loose. And he'd been pitching well. He'd had some rough outings here and there, but he was looking close-ish to the vintage 2023 version of Félix Bautista. Was having a really good season. And there were also some trade rumors circling. Ken Rosenthal had reported that the Orioles were at least listening to offers on Félix Bautista. Now, I don't put a lot of stock into the report of listening to offers. If you're a good GM, you should be listening to offers on basically everyone. That's just Mike Elias and his team doing their jobs at this point in the season, especially when the Orioles are going to be sellers at next week's deadline. But I really never thought it would make sense to deal Félix anyway. But if you were worried that he was going to get traded next week, you probably no longer have to worry, because Félix Bautista was placed on the 15-day injured list on Thursday with what the Orioles at this point are calling right shoulder discomfort. Now for Bautista, he last pitched on Sunday, got a pretty arduous, but got the save nonetheless in the final game of the series in Tampa Bay. And Bautista in that one threw a season-high 34 pitches in the ninth inning to somehow find a way to secure that win. Not only was it 34 pitches, which is the second most he's ever thrown in a single inning, or excuse me, most he's ever thrown in a single inning, second most he's ever thrown in any outing in his career. His velo was also down. The first few fastballs Bautista threw on Sunday were only clocked at about 94 miles an hour. Those were the slowest fastballs Bautista's basically ever thrown in his big league career. So that was a little concerning. Now the velo went up as the outing went on, and he started sitting 96, 97 with the fastball by the end of it, which is still a little low, but more normal for what we've seen in Bautista, at least post-surgery here in 2025. But when you combine that with the 34 pitches, you get a little bit worried, but he seemed to be okay. The Orioles didn't really need him on Monday or Tuesday. And then we hear from Tony Mansolino after Wednesday night's loss that Félix Bautista was not available on Wednesday because Felix sent a message in the 7th inning from the bullpen to the dugout that he felt something when he was kind of starting to loosen up a bit on Wednesday. And then something felt weird and he wasn't going to be available for Wednesday night's game. That was why the Orioles went to Colin Selby in a 2-2 game in the 8th inning, and Selby eventually gave up what would be the winning run for the Guardians in that 8th because they were basically saving Dominguez probably for the 9th. That would have been Dominguez's spot. Then you go to Bautista in the 9th, but he wasn't available, and they found that out in the 7th, and they had to kind of reshuffle things at that point. And they put him on the IL with a shoulder thing. The Orioles don't know much at this point. Tony Mansolino was just saying Thursday he hopes it's not severe. Obviously, that is the case. If he's mostly fine, he'd be eligible to return around August 6th. But you worry about shoulders more than elbows. This is the guy already coming off of surgery and an injury. It's just the Orioles are out of it. You want to slow play this and be as careful as possible. So if he needs a month, give him a month. If he needs the rest of the season and he'll be good for next year, give him the rest of the season. That's kind of the point we're at in this Orioles year. And it does open up chances for more guys to get chances in the big leagues. Like Cade Stroud was recalled from AAA to take his roster spot, who's pitched in 3 games for the Orioles and had a pretty good season in AAA so far, so he'll get more of a chance. And again, you'll see some Dominguez, some Soto as the closer for the time being. The both of them will then probably get traded. And again, the 2 kind of guys who've gotten save chances behind Bautista this year have been Dominguez and Baker. They'll both be off the team, so you'll probably see some Andrew Kittredge if he's here, or some Yennier Cano get some save chances until Bautista can return. But we just sit and we wait and we hope that it's nothing serious in that shoulder for Felix. Now, speaking of some other trade stuff, we do have some trade rumors, at least involving Charlie Morton. Buster Olney of ESPN reported this week that Morton's likely going to get traded. That was his report earlier in the week. And then he got a little more specific, Olney reporting that the Padres and the Orioles have discussed a Charlie Morton trade this week. Now, San Diego currently has a pretty good rotation. Dylan Cease, Yu Darvish, Nick Pivetta, Randy Vasquez, and Stephen Kolek. But that number 5 spot, it's been Kolek, it's been Kyle Hart, it's been some other guys, because Michael King, who's a great starter, has missed most of the season with shoulder issues. It hasn't been said that he's out for the year, but it doesn't look imminent, his return. And a guy like Morton would certainly provide an upgrade over Kolek, even over Randy Vasquez, who has a good ERA, but when you dig below, his peripherals are not good. And I don't think the Padres want Vasquez starting a playoff game. Right now, they'd be fine with a Cease, Darvish, Pivetta playoff rotation, but the reports are that they're at least listening on Dylan Cease, maybe trying to flip him and get other parts of the roster to be better. So Morton could at least backfill that rotation. I mean, guys like Ramon Laureano and Ryan O'Hearn would also fit on the Padres depth chart. They need some help at the bottom of their lineup, so maybe you could do a package deal here, but maybe see if for Morton in that deal, you could get a guy like a Braden Nett, 23-year-old righty who's got a 3.53 ERA and 16 starts in AAA. He's got a fastball up to 100, good breaking balls, kind of shaky command, but the kind of pitcher the Orioles should be targeting. It's very interesting to see if Morton does go to the Padres, but only mentioned that some other teams like the Mets and others could be interested in Charlie Morton. Teams are going to want him, and it helped that he had another good start on Thursday. And then the other trade news to talk about didn't involve the Orioles directly, but tangentially it does. Really I would say, maybe not the first trade of trade season. You could count Brian Baker and Adam Frazier in there, but the first hey, this is a big move to be made since the Rafael Devers trade happened on Thursday night as the Arizona Diamondbacks traded first baseman Josh Naylor to the Seattle Mariners for 2 pitching prospects. Now, the Diamondbacks were in a really interesting spot around the deadline. I actually talked about them, I think, a couple of times on episodes earlier this week, where the Orioles they should have been cheering for the Diamondbacks to win games, because the D-backs, they were in the wild card mix, but 4 games out in the NL. They had some really good talent as rentals they could trade, but they thought they might still be in it. The O's should have been cheering for the D-backs to win, so they thought more and more of, hey, even if we're not going to be buyers, we're not going to be sellers. Because the D-backs aren't sellers, the Orioles have some of the best rental players on the market. But on Thursday afternoon, Ken Rosenthal reported after the D-backs were swept by the Astros at home this week the Diamondbacks would be sellers at the deadline. And then like 6 hours later, they made their first big trade. And the D-backs have better rentals than the Orioles do. Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, Eugenio Suarez, all better than anything the Orioles can offer. And they also had Josh Naylor in the mix, and he was dealt to Seattle. So one thing, just that Naylor is on the board, hurts the Orioles because it's another kind of corner bat. And the other thing is, as we talked about in our Ryan O'Hearn episode, the Seattle Mariners would have been a perfect fit in a trade for Ryan O'Hearn, and instead they go and get Naylor. And you can kind of see Josh Naylor and O'Hearn as kind of interchangeable trade pieces this season. Both are left-handed hitting first basemen who are on expiring contracts and will be free agents after this year. Naylor is 3 years younger than O'Hearn, and he's been good for the past 4 seasons, whereas O'Hearn's only been good for the past 3 seasons, so has a little bit of a better track record. But O'Hearn has been a better hitter this year. He's got a 133 WRC plus to Naylor's 123 WRC plus coming into Thursday. O'Hearn is worlds better defensively at first base, and O'Hearn can play the corner outfield if you need him to. Naylor is nothing besides a first baseman or a DH. So because he's having a little better season and he's a little more versatile, I would, and maybe I'm a little biased, but I would probably take O'Hearn over Naylor. But they are very, very, probably the two most comparable players besides like the relievers that are out there that are available in terms of hitters on the market this year, which means, yeah, it's unfortunate that the Mariners got Naylor because now the Mariners are not going to be interested in O'Hearn. That's one team off the list that could trade for O'Hearn next week if the Orioles are looking to deal him. The flip side is we at least have a little bit of a look of what the Orioles could expect to get back in a Ryan O'Hearn trade because Josh Naylor is just such a similar player at this point. The D-backs got back 2 pitching prospects. They made it very clear that they were looking for pitching at the deadline, and I have to think the Orioles are probably going to be looking for pitching as well. The first one was 25-year-old left-handed reliever Brandon Garcia, who was actually called up by the Mariners earlier this week to make his major league debut. He was sent to AAA earlier today, and then he was traded to the Diamondbacks. Good strikeout rates, a little bit of a high walk rate in AAA for Garcia this year with a 3.51 ERA as a reliever. Fangraphs had him ranked as the number 15 prospect in the Seattle system, a 40-plus future value guy, mid to high 90s fastball, sinker, good slider, funky arm slot, kind of a major league ready reliever at 25 who is just now getting his shot and will probably slot right into the Diamondbacks bullpen. And the other pitching prospect is 21-year-old right-hander Ashton Izzy, who has made 12 starts with a 5+ ERA, but good strikeout to walk numbers in high A so far this season for Seattle. He's the number 13th ranked prospect in the Mariners system. Also a 40+ future value player over at Fangraphs. Eric Longenhagen writes he's kind of got a mid to back end rotation ceiling as a pitcher, probably targeting around a 2027 major league debut for Izzy. So this is the kind of return that the Orioles could get for Ryan O'Hearn. And to be honest, if this is the kind of package the O's get for O'Hearn, that's okay. The only qualm I would have is, an arm like Izzy who isn't even in AA yet. I wouldn't be trying to get players who aren't even in AA. If it was an arm similar to Izzy, but was already starting in AA and was at least a little bit closer, maybe could get to the big leagues by 2026 instead of 27, I would prefer that. But this is kind of what a rental corner bat is worth. You can get 2 guys who absolutely could help you as pitchers in the major leagues, but aren't top 100 prospects, aren't slam dunk starters. Both have legitimate relief risk once they get to the majors. Those are still guys that are going to help you. And they always just need guys who have arms and can get outs at this point. But this is what you can expect. And some people are going to be underwhelmed by that. This is kind of what we talked about on yesterday's episode, right? When we went back and looked at previous trades for players like this. What can the O's expect? I'd be, I think, fine with a deal similar to this for Ryan O'Hearn. And this is probably going to be the blueprint that you should expect. But we will see what other teams now could be interested in O'Hearn. Teams like the Red Sox, the Reds, the Brewers, the Padres, they're still out there. They're definitely going to want an all-star first baseman in Ryan O'Hearn. But, that's maybe some more bad news we were talking about. Bautista injury, O'Hearn not going to Seattle. But let's flip back to good news. Let's finish the podcast with good news. Draft pick signing good news and injury good news. That's coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Game Day Hugh. For Orioles fans like me, this one kind of hits the mark. Game Day Hugh makes clean, no logo gear with team-inspired colorways for every pro and college fan base. It's all about letting your colors speak for you. No giant logos, just smart, versatile style that works on game day, on the course, or anywhere in between. The hats that I got from Game Day Hugh, it pairs perfectly with whatever I'm wearing. Don't just have to wear them to the Orioles game. It doesn't replace the team's logo on stuff. It just kind of adds to the lineup of supporting the O's and wearing the colors. And it's not just the hats. They've got split shade gloves for the golfer out there, made for the golf course, or the perfect gift for the fan who has everything. I got my brother one of the golf gloves, and it's a nice fit. And right now you can get 15% off with code MLB15 at GameDayHue.com. That's GameDayHue.com. The code even stacks on bundle deals, so now's the time to load up. So let your colors talk, because colors speak louder than words. That's GameDayHue.com, code MLB15. So we finish off a Friday pod with a little bit more positive news. How about maybe the biggest news of the day for the Orioles is that they got their final big-time draft pick signed. That is Slater de Brun, the high school outfielder out of Oregon, who the Orioles selected with the number 37 overall pick in this year's draft. It was the compensation round pick that they received from the Tampa Bay Rays in the Brian Baker trade a couple of weeks ago, and they have officially now turned Brian Baker into Slater de Brun, a guy who the slot value on his pick was $2.63 million. The Orioles were negotiating with him for a while. There was rumors and reporting that de Brun wanted a big overslot deal. He was heavily considering going to college instead. He was committed to Vanderbilt, one of the best programs in the country, interested in country music. Maybe being in Nashville was another pull for him, as he's a SoundCloud country rapper as well, who goes by Lil Slay. But the Orioles got the deal done. As I talked about earlier this week, it would probably take $4 million, and that's what he signed for. And even $4 million is the bonus for Slater de Brun. The Orioles also got Braden Smith, 13th round infielder, KK Clark, 15th round pitcher, and Braden Sloan, 17th round pitcher, all also signed for $150,000 each earlier this week. So at this point, the Orioles have just over $78,000 remaining in their draft bonus pool, and they currently have 6 of their 24 draft picks who are unsigned. That is right-handed pitcher Daniel Lopez, 12th rounder, who is from a JUCO but has committed to Kansas as a transfer, actually did so last week. 14th round right-handed pitcher Brian Arancha, another JUCO guy who's committed to Oklahoma as a transfer. 16th rounder right-handed pitcher Denton Biller, also a JUCO guy, committed to Arkansas as a transfer. Then you have William Johnson, 18th round high school outfielder, committed to Georgia Tech. Then you have 19th rounder shortstop Jimmy Anderson from a small school, and 20th rounder right-handed pitcher Connor Gear, also from a small school. Now, good thing to know is that anybody who's drafted in rounds 11 through 20, anyone who is signed for $150,000 or less, that money does not count towards the bonus pool money that you have to use. So there's 3 players, Clark, Smith, and Sloan, who each signed for $150,000 this week. None of that $450,000 counted against what the Orioles have left in their bonus pool. So if any of these 6 guys sign for $150K or less, it doesn't take away from the $78,000 that the Orioles have left to spend. So here's my guess. Gear and Anderson, the 19 to 20 rounders, each signed for $150,000. William Johnson doesn't sign. He goes to Georgia Tech. And then of the other 3 pitchers, 2 of the 3 of them signed with the Orioles using that extra money, and the other one goes to his D1 school. My guess is that Biller will go to Arkansas and that they'll get Lopez and Arancha signed, although I wouldn't be surprised if actually Lopez is the one who goes to school and the Orioles get the other 2. Either way, draft pick signing deadline is coming up on Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern time. So on Tuesday's episode, we'll have the full breakdown. But the biggest part of this is Slater de Brun. A lot of people were worried, maybe unfounded-wise, that he was not going to sign with the Orioles. They get the pick from the Rays in the Baker deal. They turn it into this really high upside, left-handed hitting high school outfielder, good bat-to-ball skills, good speed, plays center field, really, really athletic guy, has room to maybe grow a little bit more into his power, put on a great show at the Team USA high school team this past summer. Like, he's a really, really talented guy who people saw as like a first-round type talent in their top 20 on their draft boards that the Orioles got at number 37, were able to overslot him to get him to sign. The Orioles had a record high bonus pool with all these high picks. I got to tell you, I think they nailed this draft. They've got all of their picks in the top 11 rounds signed so far, with some other guys hopefully coming in. Exciting draft class, at least at this point. We won't know for a while, but at least at this point, it seems like Elias nailed this draft when he had to. So great job over there, and hopefully they won't get all of them, but most of the rest of these picks signed before that deadline on Monday. And I guess we'll end with one more piece of good news. Kyle Bradish, rehab start. His first one was in Aberdeen on Thursday night. 2 innings, 1 run, 4 Ks, and 1 walk. Big thing is he threw 37 pitches and got out of there healthy. It's going to be a long road on this rehab assignment to get back to the majors, hopefully at some point in late August, but an awesome first step for Kyle Bradish. Speaking of other good news, Cade Povich was looking really good, at least his stuff was, in another rehab start in AAA on Thursday night, so that is a good sign. I think once the Orioles make some trades at the deadline, we'll probably see Povich hopefully coming off that hip issue, probably rejoin this Orioles rotation. We saw Ryan Mountcastle playing his first rehab game this week. He homered off of one of the top pitching prospects in baseball, Andrew Painter, in Norfolk on Thursday. So that was certainly a good sign as well. And then Adley Rutschman is very close to returning. He DH'd on Tuesday. He caught in the Tides game on Wednesday. Now, Adley, he was not in the lineup on Thursday, but the Orioles said they plan to get him back this weekend. Adley could be activated back to the roster tonight, which would be an awesome, awesome thing to see for the Orioles. You don't have to choose between Jacob Stallings and Alex Jackson now. You have your guy and Adley Rutschman back in the lineup, and hopefully continues his hot hitting that he was going on before he suffered that oblique injury. And hopefully we do see Adley back in the lineup tonight as the Colorado Rockies come to town. I know the Orioles are out of it, but please, Orioles, don't embarrass us. At the very least, win this series. Please sweep this series. The Rockies are 26-76. They're on track to be maybe the worst team ever. Tonight's at 7 on MASN. It's lefty Kyle Freeland against Dean Kramer in that matchup. Dean's been great lately. Freeland's actually been pretty solid. He's probably the Rockies' best starting pitcher. He's a guy who could shut down the Orioles. Saturday, also at 7 on MASN, Antonio Senzatella, the veteran righty, goes for the Rockies. He's been terrible this year, but his last start was pretty good against the Twins. Trevor Rogers goes for the O's. And then Sunday, 1:35 on MASN, lefty Austin Gomber goes for the Rockies. And that one, he's been pretty bad, especially lately. And Tomoyuki Sugano goes for the Orioles on Sunday. Then I'll be back with you on Monday. I am out of town for a couple of days this weekend, but I will be back by Sunday. So we'll still have a Monday episode recapping everything from the Orioles-Rockies series this weekend. Remember, I did go on vacation the weekend before the trade deadline last year, and the Orioles made the Zach Eflin and Sir Anthony Dominguez trades while I was gone. So there's probably a good chance the O's will make a deal either Friday or Saturday while I'm gone. If they do, I'll have an episode on Sunday evening recapping that and still have the Monday episode recapping this weekend series that, even as bad as the O's are, like, this Rockies team is a disaster. Just sweep these guys, even if it doesn't really change your playoff possibilities. Just, have a little shame, a little confidence and belief in yourself, and sweep this horrible, horrible team. But I'll be back Monday. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.